Mental health on campus has become a serious concern at universities across North America, and students in this province have increasingly been advocating for better access to counseling and other supports. But for all the good intentions that accompany such efforts, some believe it's the wrong approach. Rather than building resiliency, the argument goes, we're transforming university campuses into mental health wards. That is the concern of Hara Estroff Marano, the author of A Nation of Wimps, The High Cost of Invasive Parenting. She is editor-at-large for Psychology Today, and she joins us now for more, and we welcome you here up from New York City to the province of Ontario.
Well, thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
Great to have you here. Let us, as we set up our discussion here, I'll ask our control room to bring up this graphic, because last year more than 43,000 students from 41 Canadian post-secondary institutions were surveyed on their health. They reported being diagnosed or treated by a professional in the past year for anxiety, 18%, depression, 15%, panic attacks, 9%, insomnia and other sleep disorders, 9%. We should note 74% reported no conditions. They felt fine. But 13% of students reported seriously considering suicide within the past 12 months. And we have to say, at the University of Guelph, which is about an hour and a half from this studio here, they had 4 student suicides this past year. What's going on?
Well, first I want to say that the suicide rate at universities, and I know this is true of the United States, and human nature I don't think is very different when you cross the border, but actually the suicide rate among people of this age is actually lower on campus than it is off campus. So let us use that as the framework for saying that colleges are doing something right in protecting students from committing suicide.
But you'll acknowledge one is too many.
One is too many, and the problem is that it tends to be contagious. And this is every college president's worst nightmare, a suicide on campus. And what's going on is that we've got a generation of students that has zero distress tolerance. And with no distress tolerance, everything is traumatic, everything is a crisis. And if you can't cope with anything, the alternative is you fall off the cliff.
Why do they have zero stress tolerance?
Because they've been raised, generally speaking. And when I say generally speaking, I want to make it clear that I'm talking about a generation of young people who were raised with the idea of going to college. Their parents knew from the beginning that they were grooming their children to go to college.
Sure.
And why I mention this is because these people, whether it's in Canada, whether it's in the United States, whether it's in Brazil, this is a phenomenon that is worldwide within technologically advanced communities. These are the people who got the message the world is changing. Somewhere in the late 80s, somewhere in the 80s, they got the message the world's changing. Computers were coming in. These were visible symbols that the world was changing. We got the internet.
They're digital natives. They should get all this.
No, but the parents are not the digital natives. And what the parents sensed was that the world was changing. We now had this global competition, and no one wanted their child to fall behind. And they knew that it was different. And parents began pushing their kids, and in pushing their kids to succeed, whether on the soccer field or in academics, they took all the lumps and bumps out of life for them. And what we didn't know is that this makes kids tremendously psychologically fragile.
Because the rest of it presumably is the same. You know, for 100 years, kids have been going away from their parents to a new place, taking more challenging courses, being in a different environment, away from the kind of adult supervision they'd had. So all of that's the same, isn't it?
That's the same, but I think parents are different, and parents seem to have forgotten that the role of a parent is to produce an independent independently functioning human being at some sort of finish line somewhere maybe around 21, 22. That's not happening
No,
these days.
infantilizing is what's happening too much, right? Yeah.
Yes.
Or as you so elegantly put it, making a nation of wimps.
Right.
Does this phenomenon affect, in your studies, one gender more than the other?
No, it cuts across genders. And women students, there are more women at universities than men. I don't know what the rate is in Canada.
No, same thing here.
Okay, 60-40 is the average. Some schools, liberal arts schools, and smaller schools tend to be higher ratio of women, but that's 50% more women than men on any campus at prime mating age. So relationship issues are very big and a very big source of distress.
Are more students today seeking psychological counseling than they used to?
There are, and you can say, and it's right to say that is a good thing. On the other hand, it's not that we've made it too easy, but I think we focus on their weaknesses and not on their strengths. And I think it's time to shift that balance, and instead of rewarding students and making exceptions for them based on their limitations, we say, hey, you know what? You all need a set of skills to operate independently in the world, and your parents have done a variable job. So we can't count on it. So maybe universities now are tasked with the responsibility of some kind of basic emotional training for students as they come in to prepare them all for the independently functioning in university.
I wonder if we have to break this down a little bit, because we keep talking about university as if, going to UCLA with 100,000 students would be the same phenomena as going to, a college in some rural part of a different state where you might have, 1,000 kids. Is it the same regardless?
It's roughly the same. And in fact, schools of different sizes talk to each other, coordinate information, gather practices. I've been at many, many conferences and heard the talk, been involved in it.
Well, here's, this is the National College Health Assessment Survey. This is from last year. Students were asked, what's affecting you? And here we go, board 2, we'll put the list up here. Stress was affecting them, 42% said yes. Anxiety, 33%. Sleep difficulties, 28%. Cold, flu, ears, nose, throat infections, 26%. Depression, 21%. Internet use or computer games, 19% acknowledge that. Work, 17%. Concern for a troubled friend or family member, 16%. Relationship difficulties, 13%. I suspect that's low. Finances, 10%. Why are so many students, let's pick up on this a little more. There's so much lack of coping going on here.
Yes, well, if you have no coping skills, if you've never had to deal with little difficulties, and the value of dealing with little difficulties is, one, you gain the skill. You learn, everybody does it differently. You learn how to master some little problem. But in addition to that, you get a meta skill, and the meta skill is, a certain kind of self-confidence that, hey, I can deal with what life throws my way. So if you're not getting that, what happens is that any bump in the road, anything that doesn't go your way, is highly stressful.
Parents think, though, they're doing a solid for their kids by helping them solve their problems, or maybe just solving their problems every step of the way. I gather you're saying they're not helping.
No, I mean, nurturing is, a high wire act. And I think that parents have to remember what the goal is, that the goal is still to produce an independently functioning person at the end of the road. And, you have to constantly let the leash out and give them increasing responsibility. We see kids who come to school, they're terrified, they've never been on their own, they can't change. a bill to get change to put in a washing machine.
What?
I was literally on the phone in an interview with someone at one of the State University of California campuses where the counselor hosted a student as we were on the phone interviewing who couldn't get change for the washing machines in a room next door.
Because they didn't know how to operate the machine?
Didn't know how to.
Hadn't done it before.
Yeah.
Couldn't figure it out.
Right.
Well, okay, I can't defend that. But let's look at it this way. They're on their own for the first time, possibly in their lives, in a very new environment, quite possibly a new city, away from mom and dad, or mom and or dad. The introduction of the Holy Trinity of sex, drugs, rock and roll for the first time in their lives without a lot of supervision around. I mean, why would we be surprised that this could go south?
Wait, we wouldn't be surprised if they had a few problems regulating the amount of sex, regulating the amount of drugs, regulating the amount of rock and roll. That is not what's going on here. We wish it were. We wish that were the extent of the problem. This is far more deeply internal. This is really the inability to regulate their emotions at the deepest level. One of the items on your list was internet. Mm-hmm. And, you know, now, okay, to add to everything. And I have to say, this is unique to this generation. And parents certainly can't take the responsibility for this. But this is the generation that got whammed with social media. And, I mean, social media, it's just constructed to lure you in. It's superbly addictive. It's built by people who put bells and whistles of human responsiveness in here, guaranteed to hook anybody. But it's hooked these people before they have any self-regulation skills. They are never going to get them. I mean, it's just, you know, unless they go to an island for a month and detox from social media, I mean, it's just not going to happen. And
let me read this quote from you, from your magazine Psychology Today, from about a year and a half ago. You wrote, "Step by well-meaning step, campuses are being transformed into something more akin to mental health wards than citadels of learning. Colleges are already the largest employer of psychologists in the country. But now, personnel and administrators from all walks of campus life are conscripted into the business, subjected to training in how to spot students who could cause trouble to themselves or others."
And they're not the only ones. The students are trained peer-to-peer to recognize and help. So everybody's being recruited.
No, I get you, but I talked to a university official at the University of Guelph the other day, where they've had 4 suicides already. Mm-hmm. And they had 80 staff one night knock on all the doors in residence and just poke their head in to say, "Everything okay? You sinking under the weight of work or problems or anything like that?" That seemed like a wise thing to do.
Well,
you don't think so?
I'm going to say I'm not sure. Okay, this is called postvention. What do you do after there's been an event? And there is a lot of debate, and unfortunately there's a gathering of best practices about what you do in a situation like this. And I think there's a gathering consensus around this that maybe you don't do what seems intuitive, that maybe there are non-intuitive ways to approach it. And one of the practices that's emerging as good is universities are finding out that you don't go campus-wide. You don't have campus-wide memorial services. There's ever the danger of contagion. So you're working with that notion and what seems to be effective. And I'm couching it deliberately in conditional terms because I think this is an evolving body of knowledge. And what seems to be effective is containing in sort of dealing with it in concentric circles, starting from the people most involved. And really, even though your instincts are let's grieve and let's have a campus-wide service because everyone wants to be transparent and not hide these things.
And a vigil, and we'll bring the media in.
Exactly.
And,
that doesn't work. And I think people are discovering you contain it with the people most involved. You get involved the people who were around the student, and you go out as far as you need to go. And that's not necessarily the most intuitive route, but I think there is gathering a body of wisdom in handling these things.
They're actually a gathering body of other guests in the green room who want to come in and make their contribution on this subject as well. So thank you for getting us started here, and we're going to continue right after this.
Help TVO create a better world through the power of learning. Visit TVO.org and make a tax-deductible donation today.